let me introduce you today to Cristina Mañas Fernández. Welcome to Brusca Cetrina, welcome to the channel, and thank you very much for being here. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She is head of performance and simulation at the Nissan Formula E team. She worked for Jaguar, for the Formula E team as well before. She is member of the Women's Sport Institute and was awarded as one of the 100 most influential women in sports in 2023. And first question to you, Cristina, is sky really the limit?
Yeah, well, thanks first for having me. Yeah, I think above all, I'm very grateful for the job that I get to wake up to do every day. That's for sure.
That's great. Well, first or second of all, congratulations for the incredible weekend at Jeddah. Second place in the first race, first place in the second one, and Nissan is now leading the drivers, manufacturers, and the teams championships. So wow, what a start of the year! This is the third race, isn't it?
It is. It was. So the Jeddah weekend was the third one. So as you said, there was what we call the double header. So we had the first race, that was the first with pit boost. That was an interesting one, and then the second race in a bit more of a standard format. And so yeah, we come away being the leaders of that championship. But all in all, it doesn't really mean much at this stage, in the sense that I think what the team is there for isn't just to win a race, but we've got the longer term vision in that we chasing for that championship in a few months' time. So is at the very end of the championship where it really counts.
Yeah, but winning is always good, especially at that level. So anyways,
yeah, of course.
Yes, the title is yet to be decided for sure, but yeah, it's already a great achievement. So very good commencing of this new season that has a lot of new elements. How long have you been working in Formula E, and what is different this season from others?
Yes, I've now been in Formula E for a while. I started at the end of season 2 was when I first started, and so that means now it's almost 9 years of Formula E. So for sure it's changed a lot. I think if some of you have seen how the Formula E races looked in the past, and today it's evolved a lot. From as far as having 2 cars because one wasn't enough to the race because of the battery capacity, to today having only 1 car, and where we're increasing the power of the cars every generation. I think it's definitely evolved a lot through years.
So now is the generation 3?
This is what we call the generation 3, exactly. Technically it's generation 3.5 because this year and for the next season as well, there's been a few evolutions in the car, which are kind of like minor from what the Gen 3 was. And then the next one coming up, which will be the next big generation change, it'd be what we already call the Gen 4, which is already in the making.
Okay. So something else is cooking already.
Something else is cooking already.
Never stops. Yeah, that's cool. You have worked for Campos Racing in Spain, Jaguar in UK, and now Nissan in France. How different the racing approaches are
yeah, I wouldn't probably say the racing approaches in the sense that it's still Formula E, but what it definitely is different is the culture. And I think if someone like you, for example, are working in Germany, I think you'd probably be able to tell the same. The culture of every team is really very different. And bear in mind that although there's still international teams, in that me, myself, I'm working in these teams where originally I'm from Spain, and like me, we've got some other colleagues that are also coming from different backgrounds in different countries. There's still the underlying culture, which I think it very much comes through whoever is at the very top of that team or the board of managers that we may have. So definitely the culture is different. And with that comes a little bit of blending, definitely, and to getting used to how things are done in a different team.
Okay, this just came up to my mind. Did you meet Adrian Campos? Did you meet him?
I did. Yeah, I get to meet him. Yeah.
And how was it? I guess, very interesting guy who was the discoverer of Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, definitely.
And Alex Palou, I think, as well.
Yeah.
In different areas of racing. So Formula One, Le Mans, Formula Indy.
To be fair, with him was very brief because Campos had these two, say, headquarters of places, if you like. There is the original Valencia one where he was based at, and where the F2 teams was based on everything, and that was the one I was working on in Barcelona, it was more of like the electric branch of things, if you like. So he was less so often there, so it was a bit of a brief one. I think he was somewhere on a track at some point that I had a chance to briefly meet him.
Coming back to your work, what is the favorite part of your work?
I'd probably say the favorite part is that it never is the same. It's constantly, the biggest crocodile is constantly changing. So from one weekend to the next, although the core of what we do, it translates on every weekend and it's kind of like the same. The challenge is definitely different. Formula E goes to a street circuit, so you go onto a very bumpy circuit, which is just roads on a normal daily basis, which means you may have a particular challenge in one track, and then the next weekend you go to like somewhere like Jeddah, which still, although is partly a street, is much more permanent, and we're driving over to kind of like an F1 tarmac, which is very different to a street tarmac, and then the challenges are different. So I think that's probably the most interesting thing, at least in my opinion, and what I get to do every day is there's no week that is the same. It's constantly changing.
Well, you call it something like the big crocodile.
Yeah.
Yes.
As in the biggest challenge, the biggest problem.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Biting, I think. Yeah, it's very
chasing crocodiles, isn't it?
Nice. In my mind, simulation is, I perceive it as the total engineer project of due to this holistic view of the car and the circuit. What is your perspective as head of performance and simulation? How do you see it?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and it's very much the focus at Nissan. As you say, I mean, why I think it's so important simulation nowadays for an engineering team, really, and a bit more specific to motorsport, is because track time is very limited. As a manufacturer, Nissan, we've only got a certain amount of allocated days that we can go testing with what we call the development car. And still, even though you use those tests to take this development car to track as best as you can, there's still always going to be a different case scenario when you go to, no matter where in the world, to a different track. There's always going to be differences in between where you're going to find out during a race weekend to the conditions that you might have got on your test days. So you're never really going to be able to track test all of the possible scenarios you can ever have, which is why then, to me, the shifts goes to focusing on simulation. And the better you can get your models to behave as reality, then it means that it becomes a 24/7 test bed, really. It is very much a point where we making progress at Nissan, and we're trying to invest as much as we can into our simulation tools, our simulator, and how much effort from the engineering group we put into making the models as close to reality as possible, which is an ever ongoing loop. I think we'll never really get to a point to say, well, now we're happy with how the model is, that's it. I think you're constantly evolving it and working on it so that it reflects as much as possible the complexity of an ever-changing track conditions. But I think it's definitely the way forward.
How do you face this amount of variables of a race in Formula E? Because you have, let's say, the normal race, tire management, energy management, with I think it's now 4-wheel drive recuperation as well. You have the fan boost, attack mode, pit boosts, safety cars. So I mean, it is huge.
Yeah, there are lots of variables, and I think the foremost of that is that that isn't a one person's job to put all that together. So for every single variable that you mentioned there, so you've got energy management, we've got an energy management group that's looking at making the optimal deployment of the energy that we've got. Then we've got the tire group, we've got the performance group, we've got stimulation, and so all of these groups come together to pull out all of the bits and pieces that we need to know to then brief the engineering group and the drivers to what we think is the best way to approach a race. So all of that really, I think, to give you a little bit of an idea for the race weekend, we start preparing at the very least about 2 weeks before, which means all of the work starts on what we call the pre-event simulation. Then from there, we go test in our simulator, so we kind of first validate already to whether we think it goes in the right direction. At that point, we also put the drivers in the loop, who are also an important factor into how we're going to approach a race weekend, because you can have drivers that are very experienced, that know Formula E very well, that may be able to do a different strategy to a driver that is a rookie, for example, where you have to take the race differently with them. So all of that, we do our preparation in the simulator, and then you get to track, you validate whether or not the track is built as you thought, the tarmac is as you thought, because again, going back to tracks that are built in a few days' time, at times what you get on track when you arrive there is actually different to what you thought it was going to be. So we readjust constantly, and then ultimately we go through every practice session through quali and race, which again in Formula E everything happens very fast. So you've got now normally the FP1 happens the day before, but otherwise you've got practice session, a quali, and a race in a space of about 10 hours or so. So it means that you've also got to be reacting to things quite quickly during the race weekend. But yeah, ultimately coming down to what you were initially asking is every engineer has got their scope, and then everything gets put together, and then we then share it and with the groups and the drivers to then come up with the best approach for the race. So
it's really, I mean, it's pure definition of how a team looks like.
100%, yeah. It's a team effort. There's definitely no one person does it all.
So you said that you need to adjust a lot continuously.
Yeah.
So how can you make those simulations? Do you send the data also to the factory, or you have all your models? You bring all your models with you, I imagine, to the races. Because yeah, I guess you have more tools in the factory.
Yeah, definitely. So that's all regulated. By regulations, we can only have 6 people working on what we call the race ops, so remotely, which means we've got these 6 engineers remotely available for us, which are an extension effectively of the trackside team. So there is, for example, at the very start of the weekend, we go on what we call the track walk. So basically we're scanning around the track. We've got certain couple of tools that we can measure what we call the micro, macro characteristics of the tracks. We can also take measurements of the grip at the start of the weekend. So we take visual pictures. So we do a compilation of go out and scout the track before we start running, and that already is used back at the factory for them to check to which extent the track really is as we had it on our models. That's kind of the first layer of how we check if things are already diverging from what we initially thought before arriving there. And then after every practice session, so we got all of the data that gets generated, that gets sent back to track. And then we do what we call the correlation, which means, okay, we drive on our simulator, and then we check to which extent we managed to correlate what we get at simulator to what we got on track. And then there we see if apex speed had changed, if fundamental things of the track layer have changed. And then that's again another loop of correlation. And all of that then means that 2 things that can happen is that correlation is there or thereabouts, happy days. it means all of the pre-event work is still valuable. Or what can happen is that certain corners have changed considerably, and that is going to affect, in first place, going to affect the energy management. So that means that then the energy management group needs to redo all of the optimization and come up with another batch of, say, calibrations that we'll need to then test on the next practice session on the cars. So that can be a little bit of an example of how we need to adjust.
So the amount of work is and the pace is amazing. We had Akshay Gupta at the beginning of the year, and he was saying that one year of racing is equivalent to a decade of normal life. Like racing is life on steroids. And now, the more I get into this world that I absolutely admire and love, the more this sentence comes into my mind. And by listening to you, I cannot imagine how dynamic the environment is, because it seems that the races themselves are slow, no, given the amount of things that are happening behind during the race. So. Definitely. Wow, I take my hat off. I don't have a hat, but I will take it off, definitely. That's true.
I mean, again, it is a team effort. I think the one thing for sure is that, when you arrive to track, you've got to be ready to either, it can be an easy day, but actually you've also got to bear in mind that it can be a very challenging day, and somewhat you pull through it because, the green light goes when it goes off and no one is waiting for you.
To what extent is there improvisation by the driver during the race? I mean, for example, in terms of energy management, is there a set button that you between laps 1 and 10, you go strategy 1, and then the driver has to follow a set of instructions, or is the car somehow limited in power during different phases of the race, or is just management that you have already worked out before and the driver executes?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So most of it is trained beforehand. So meaning what we do, the working simulator with our drivers, we tell them already, look, the race is going to look this way or this other way, whether it's going to be a race that's going to be what we call high energy sensitive, meaning that you're going to really have to be spot on at being efficient in your driving, or whether it's going to be a race that's less energy sensitive because the track profile does such that everybody's very early on in the race driving pretty much flat out, meaning that then being efficient is kind of like a secondary in those type of races. So we already know beforehand when we arrive to a track which type of races is going to be. Things that can change, though, the approach is your starting position. We're probably not going to go around the same strategy if our drivers are starting top 5, say, or if they're at the very back of the grid. So the strategy can then be refined depending on where you're at. And in terms of the aids that the drivers got through the steering wheel, in Formula E, we do an optimization of energy. I mean, if you've watched the Formula E race, we very much all go down to 0 kilowatt hour at the very end of a race. I mean, that there is no, if you overspend, you're really paying for it afterwards. And I think an example of that is the Jeddah race, one where we overspent it a bit more than needed, and then we got overtaken at the very last corner because everybody's optimizing for the last kilowatt hour. The drivers got this optimization is made by these energy management engineers, and then that gets translated into certain aids for the drivers, so that they know what if basically we chop it out in 3 kind of phases. So you're accelerating, you're lifting, or you're braking. The driver knows when they've got to be lifting and braking. So there is this base optimization that is on the car, and they get these aids. whether they improvise from that base optimization, it can happen at times where, for example, they are in traffic. When you're in traffic, it's different to when you're in free air, because it means you can't just lift and brake where you want, because basically you cars around you, and you've got to adapt a little bit to what the car in front is doing. In these kind of cases, then yes, it means that the driver's got to like preempt their aids a little bit and go a little bit off tangent just to follow the flow.
Okay. So there is a bit of jazz here.
There is a bit of
sometimes that I guess is difficult to transmit to the drivers, because they just want to go as fast as possible, as fast as they can.
Yeah, I think, and for that, probably the best would be if you can really get a racing driver to explain you how it is to drive a Formula E car. But I think it has come for them with a fair amount of training that's needed to do this type of races, because it's far from being flat out races from the very beginning. I think they very much, you've got to really be looking at what the car is telling you to do, because otherwise you can very easily kill yourself in energy and just not being able to finish a race. So yeah, they definitely need to understand that sense of doing a race in Formula E, which can be different to other races or other series.
Looking a bit at the history of Formula E, now we are in season 11. When it started with 2 cars per race to what it is now with the introduction of the pit boost, so there has been an incredible evolution. Just to switch between 2 cars per race to only one is a huge step forward for the battery, for example, for the battery development. Where do you see Formula E in, for example, 3 or 5 years?
Yeah, I think what they wanted to do most of all, and it's kind of what we've seen through from the very beginning to now, is increasing in power more and more, because as you say, that's coming with continuing the development of battery cell technology, continuing the development of electric motors. So it's going to continue, I think, to increase in power, and then bringing up more and more technology that's relevant to road cars. Then we started kind of like simple, because you wouldn't be able to pull all of the complexity of electric road cars into the first generation of cars. But now I think we're moving more and more towards technologies that, I mean, some of them, for example, as you said, the pit boost, which is something that still isn't available for an everyday electric car. So I think that more and more going to be moving towards making technologies such that then we can continue to push the boundaries and one day become relevant.
I find Formula E super advanced technologically. From the cars themselves, you can feel it. Is how you have like this feeling of being part of a Tron film with all the lights. There is a lot of interaction with the audience as well. It is very original and very unique, very spectacular, very interesting show. We always have this, let's say, the comparison between Formula 1 and Formula E. And what would you bring from Formula 1 to Formula E and vice versa? Is there something that you had in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult really to compare them. I think from the very beginning, Formula E has wanted to do their format in their own way, and I think it's difficult to compare them. I mean, one thing Formula 1's got is that they can fully design their cars, which I think is extremely rewarding and challenging for the Formula 1 teams. In Formula E, you've got to bear in mind that manufacturers can only design the rear end, so the rear powertrain and the rear suspension, but the bodywork that you see, the front end of the car, is all the same for everybody. Of course, there is an underlying reason for that, which is to reduce the expenditure on Formula E batteries and to make it more accessible, which means you can have from very big manufacturers to some other not so very big manufacturers that can still be alive and be actually competitive in a Formula E environment. So I think these are very different two categories. And for Formula E, I think that they're taking a good approach. I think from the very beginning, that's where they position themselves to be somewhere where you're going to limit your budget. You're going to have like a common frame for everybody, so that actually the field can be competitive without being the budget the biggest differentiator. And I think that they're doing a good job at that, because you turn up to a Formula E race and you don't actually know who's going to win. So I think these are very different two categories, and it's difficult to really compare them.
So as you were saying, the Formula E competition is kind of more accessible in terms of costs, but there are also big names, as you mentioned. How does it feel to be in a place that is evolving with great names such as Porsche, Andretti, McLaren, Lola, Maserati, Cupra, of course, Jaguar, Nissan? How does it feel to be in that environment?
Yeah, I think it's definitely rewarding to be able to work as part of a team in Formula E. I think it's also great to see that Formula E is getting the interest from so many different manufacturers, because the more we are, the more interesting it's going to be. So yeah, it's to say the least, is definitely very rewarding.
Okay, yeah, congratulations again for this. Which has been now coming about the perception of the drivers, which has been the, let's say, hashtag mind-blowing detail that a driver has told you about with the car or the simulator?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think the one that got stuck with me ever since, and in fact I wasn't there, but I got told that this happened. It was back in the day with Campos, that was then doing the operational and the design for Mahindra at the moment, at the time. So back then they had Nick Heifel in one of their drivers, and we were out testing, and apparently he came back after a run and said there's something loose on the car, something is not right on the rear end of the car. And so then they put everything apart, mechanics start having a look, and actually it turned out there was a loose bolt just hanging out on the rear end, and he was able to feel it or hear it, or however he felt that, then he was able to realize that there was a loosened bolt somewhere around, which I thought was quite impressive from him.
Yeah, well, what level of perception. I think I read some time ago that Carlos Sainz was able to detect at his very early days the one tire that had a little bit less pressure than the others. Just by driving, he could feel it.
Just by driving.
And this is another level. Yeah, I'm always amazed with these stories. That's cool. Now let's talk a little bit about roses and spines in your career. If you had to choose the sweetest moment in your career, which one would be? And also the most challenging one, the spine.
Okay, so I think the one highlight probably be, which is a little bit linked to what we were saying earlier about simulation and how it is key nowadays. I think it probably be the Jakarta race win with Jaguar a few seasons ago now, and the reason being, so Jakarta was a new track, so all of the challenges that we were discussing about earlier, and be ready to react to something. That's even more so the case when you go to a new track, because it means you don't have data from that track. You don't have past seasons data. You've never been there. You don't know what's going to look like. So we're going to Jakarta, and so we were doing the simulator preparation, and then we had put again also a lot of effort into making our simulator and simulation tools the best possible. And so through that, we then came up with kind of like a setup concept from our simulation preparation with the driver that was quite outlier from anything that we would have done before on track. But yet I think the engineering group at that point decided to make a bold decision on to actually using that kind of like outlier setup that yet on all of the metrics were coming up as the better suited for the track they were going to. And so we put that setup arriving to track. We barely really changed it through the race weekend. So from the get-go was actually working quite well. I think we were starting after qualifying somewhere about P4, and we actually won that race. And what I take up from there wasn't so much the win really, but actually how we approached that weekend. I think it was really very, very rewarding from an engineering point of view to have been able to actually kind of like trust simulation and do that very data-driven approach into, you know, coming up with something that would have completely out of the window to anything that we would have done before, and yet put it on track and actually realize that it was behaving as expected. I think that was a very rewarding moment.
Okay.
Yeah, and then on to the challenge. I think any challenging moment is probably any end of season where we might have been in contention for winning the championship until the very last race, and yet that hasn't materialized. I think that's always a challenging moment. As much as losing a race or anything that may happen during the season, I think you dust it off quite quickly and you move on quite quickly. I think the very end of the season where you might have been, and again that's been the case in the past few seasons. I've been lucky enough with the driver I was working with to be in contention for the championship until the very last race, and I think losing out there is definitely a bit challenging and one that probably you take a bit more days to recover from.
Yeah, it has to be really tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, I mean, there's some videos of me in tears because of that out there. So
and then how do you regenerate after a race weekend or a season when you have this carousel of emotions, of highs and lows? How do you regenerate? How can you recover your energy? We were talking about energy management for the car, but your self-energy management, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think during the season, that is a high or a low. I think you leave it behind quite quickly. To be fair, I think whether it's been a very good or a bad weekend, it only really lasts a few hours, because then very quickly you're on to thinking about whether it was what needs addressing from the weekend, where we can do better and then prepare the next one. So you very quickly onto the next event and focusing on how to make the car go fast. So there isn't really much time to really think about what happened in the weekend, and I think is about continue to push. Of course, you take probably a day off to like switch up a little bit from racing business, but then you very quickly back onto it. And I think to an extent is also what keeps us going. I think is the fact that while you know that you've got another race coming, I think that's fueling us in a way. It's a bit strange to say, but I think that's fuel for us to know, okay, there's another race coming, so I know if I stand still, we're actually going backwards. So you've got to continue to move forwards and prepare the next race the best you can.
Wow. And what is failure and what is success for you, Cristina?
So if we start by success, is to do the 100% of what our potential for a race weekend, is, which our potential isn't always going to be to win, but if it is to do a P5 or a P10 or whatever it may be, that we do fully what our potential was. I think failure then is kind of the opposite to that, is if you know you could do to this match and we actually by X or Y we don't manage to fulfill what our potential coming to that weekend was. I think that we kind of take as something that we need to improve on and address.
Yeah, and it's a very good reflection. Yeah, to exploit your potential as much as when you know that it is there, and it feels bitter that you did not. Yeah, you did not achieve what it was. Let's say in front of you at this level of competition, for sure. And yeah, who inspires you? Who inspires you to push to that limit all the time?
I think the few references that I've had are mostly people that I don't necessarily know themselves personally, but mostly people who I'm inspired by their work ethic, I think. So again, by the work ethic or the work approach, what I mean is what they transpire in terms of how they approach their work. This is what I'm mostly motivated by. Yeah. Okay. I think that's definitely what I'm mostly motivated by. So it's I think as part of we've not mentioned it yet, but in doing all of this, I think it can very easily get very emotional. So I think I'm mostly inspired by people who can always get their emotions under control in this roller coaster of what racing can be. This is certainly something that I find inspirational, and that I try to be better myself as well.
Wow, what an insight! Yeah, maybe because you are in a very interesting environment, surrounded by your teammates, other teams. You're surrounded by drivers, a lot of cool people that you are able to meet there in these circuits environments. Can you tell us a meaningful advice or a comment you have received from any of them? Doesn't need to be famous, or from your colleagues, maybe from your manager or something like this.
I'd probably say enjoy it. I think that once I've got this this comment of enjoy what you're doing as well, because you know, we always focus into, as I was saying earlier, is into how we can make things better and how we can improve and what didn't work and how, you know, trying to refine every little detail. But I think you've also got to remember to enjoy it, because it's definitely a very rewarding job, the one that we get to do. And so it's also enjoy that, although you may be on a low, you've got to enjoy the fact that, you know, you're out there on a track doing what you do, surrounded by a team of people where you spend most of your time with, really. I think we spend definitely a lot more hours with our team crew than we do with our families. So I think it's also to remember to enjoy all of that and not just get carried away by it, you know, analysis and preparing on to the next thing and the next thing. And so
so this is kind of an advice that you receive. Is this also an advice that you will give to newcomers?
Yeah, definitely. It's an advice that I have had, but I definitely say the same to someone. Yeah.
Now the next question is a little bit connected with what we were talking about, and this is actually because your interview has been very popular in this in the audience of the channel. So we have some few additional questions from the people that watch the channel. And yeah, what would you say to all women and girls to engage more in Formula One and motorsport? And also, how did you get there? This is a question from Rocío.
Yeah. So I got there, I mean, from the very beginning, from a very early age. I think it's probably down to my dad a little bit, where, of course, being from Spain, we would be watching Formula One and watching Alonso winning his championship with Renault. So, and I remember back then when I was watching Formula One with my dad, I wasn't really that interested into the drivers themselves, but I was always far more interested by the car that you saw behind, and I always thought these people must be very intelligent, you know, to do that. So I'd like one day to be one of those. So it all started there, and so that meant from very early, I knew I kind of wanted to go towards doing something engineering related, which then meant I went to university to do industrial engineering in Spain, which, as you know, is a bit more of like a generalist engineering, and then went further down into doing a master's that was a bit more automotive specific. What I'd say to, I mean, women and girls in particular is that don't really get carried away by the fact that they say there aren't many. Yes, it's the fact that there aren't many women doing a technical job in motorsports, but I think it's now been a while since there are loads of initiatives actually taking place to bring motorsport to young boys and girls, because I think that's probably where it starts. If you don't know that exists, you can never make that choice. So I think it's just to bring the awareness of this world to the young generations, and then if that's what you like, then put the bricks in place so that you can have the education that you need, whether it's been you want to be a mechanic or you want to be an engineer, you want to be something else, a driver, whatever it may be. Educate yourself, I think, to the best you can, get some hands-on experience, and then knock at the doors. I think you're gonna get probably a no or a rejection, or we've not got anything for you now, but keep on knocking at the door, and I think it'll come.
I like this. Keep knocking on the door. The door will open eventually. The next question is from Aurora, and she would like to know what motivates Formula E compared to Formula One. Is just electric motors versus hybrids, or is a completely different world?
I think it's very different, and I mean, I haven't got first-hand experience in Formula One, but I think knowing a little bit the two categories, I think it's very different, and it all starts, for example, from the size of the teams. I mean, a Formula One team nowadays is about 1,000 people. Formula E team is much smaller than that. I think if you put together, again, mechanics, designers, trucks engineers, everybody, it's probably about 70, 80 people. What that means, though, is that you get to do, I think, a lot of things. You can actually get to learn from various different things, and which is something that I think in other categories you tend more to specialize on something and to become an expert on a more restricted area, whereas in Formula E you can actually see through various different areas, because it means that we've got less people, so then you've got that kind of like degree of freedom to actually go and explore a bit more in different areas. So I think, again, it's a little bit to what we were saying earlier, is this so different. In fact, they're both motorsports, yet the categories are so different that I think for sure the rhythm is very different. Cool.
This next question is I really like this one. This comes from Marina, yeah. And it's do you give nicknames to the cars that you own or drive? And do the cars in the garage also have nicknames?
No, they actually don't. Actually don't. There's a funny one. But to be fair, I've never heard any of the cars I've worked with having a nickname. No.
Okay.
No, I think they remain race cars.
Okay. Nice. This question is from Agnieszka. She's a coach, a professional coach. We love coaching here in this channel, and she's been part of the show. And she's not very far from here now. And her question is it's about connecting to your future self. So what does Cristina Mañas, what would she say to you in 5 years from now?
Yeah, I think I mean, if I kind of look back to what I would say to me 5 years ago, I'm probably kind of like extrapolate it. I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier, is about enjoying it, is to not to forget to take those moments and again enjoy what you're doing, and with a bunch of people that you're doing it, which comes through when you change teams. It means that you leave some people behind to then meet some new people. So I think it's to know that I mean, along the way you would empathize a bit more with some of the people, and then there'll be some other ones where you're less in line with, but ultimately you can learn from them all, and to enjoy the moment. Enjoy.
That's again very cool reflection. We almost done with the interview, but there is an additional one that is a classic of the Brusca Cetrina. Okay. And is if there is something that we haven't asked you that you would like to point out or tell.
Yeah, I think I mean, I think we've covered mostly all. I think we've discussed about kind of like more the world of engineering and how specifically simulation can be fundamental. But I think beyond that, to be fair, if I had to describe motorsport and what it's like to work in a racing team, I think we shouldn't forget that's the people's sport. And I think that's what comes first, is actually the people. So when, for example, saying earlier, what could you advise to someone that wants to follow the paths of who you're going to say engineering or whatever discipline it is, get yourself educated and etc. But I think in addition to that, and in equal measure, I don't think it comes second. I think it's as important as getting educated in your core subject. I think it's also to learn how to work as part of a team and how to be a good team member. I think it's definitely key, which means, you know, communicating effectively, understanding different people backgrounds. We're saying at the very beginning, you know, you're now working in a certain culture, before was a different culture, and ultimately you're surrounded by people who may have or not been born in the same country than you. So it's just different culture and different backgrounds, and so it's able to understand that all and work with that and communicate effectively. Another example is when we were saying, okay, you've got few hours to actually prepare a race. That comes down to everybody's got to communicate things very effectively, otherwise it won't work. So all of that, it really is the interaction with people, and I think that is definitely key as well to what we do.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, what a very cool reflection to finish the interview about teamwork and communication. Is yeah, really good to hear from you and from your experience. Thank you very much, Cristina, and best of luck in Miami. Have the greatest race, bring the trophy home, as we say, no, in motorsport. Yeah, the greatest success. And thank you very much for being here in the channel.
Thanks for having me.
See you.
Thank you. See you.